This month's Where Did the Road Go is brought to you by three wonderful people: Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and 36 Dingo. It is also made possible by all of my Patreons, and if you want to become a patron, www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I am back here with Nathan Issac of the Penny Royal Podcast.
Thanks for having me back on, man. I'm super excited to talk again.
And we definitely talk way too much about stuff before we do the show.
It's a fantastic discussion, though. Wide-ranging topics.
It's all the secret stuff.
That's right. It's the stuff that would get us in trouble if people knew about it.
And the answers to everything.
That's right. Yeah.
So when you started this season of Penny Royal, you were talking about True Detective and like this roadway thing, like this secret sort of thing going on with the roadways. And do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I love talking about that. I'm a big fan of True Detective. And when the creator of True Detective this was an interview when he was, someone had asked him about the second season. First season was fantastic. And they asked him what he was working on for the second season, and he mentioned that it was going to be about the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. And I was like, oh man, that sounds fantastic. Then the second season came out, and it wasn't really about that.
Yeah, I never watched the second season because people told me don't even bother. The second season isn't that good.
Yeah, it's okay. I enjoyed all three seasons of True Detective.
Wait, there were three?
There's a third season too.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And I really, the first season is just
amazing,
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think he was always chasing. I think the first season it took him like 10 years to write that, and then it was like within 2 years he needed to produce another season, and so it didn't have the same amount of time and focus in it. But anyway, it was all right. The second season was okay, but it wasn't about the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. There was some road stuff in there, some stuff about Southern California. But anyway, I thought, man,
even as good as the first season was, I wanted more King in Yellow. Yes.
Well, they could have continued that storyline and gone deeper, right?
Yeah.
And I guess he just wanted to change it up, or I don't know what he was thinking, but ultimately it wasn't as, I think, occult based as it could have been. But he, when I read that interview with Nick Pizzolatto, the creator, when I read that interview, I thought, for him to say that, he must have had a huge amount of research about the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. So I thought, if the second season of True Detective is not about that, then I'm going to educate myself along those lines, because I'm very curious as to what he would have been referring to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that I'd done a lot of research on Route 66. There are a lot of connections to the Freemasons, and I definitely don't think that the Freemasons are behind, there's any large conspiracy that the Freemasons are controlling the world or something.
Right.
But definitely, when you look at Freemasons as a secret society and as a political entity, especially the fact that a lot of the road commissions in America were the guys that were running that, because they'd been appointed because of political favor. They were in those positions of power. They were putting their friends in other positions of power. If these guys knew that a road was going to go a certain way, then they'd say, hey man, buy up the property in this place, and we're going to connect it to them. We're going to make a lot of money. And so those discussions to make those plans definitely happened in these secret fraternal groups,
Sure.
That were, mainly, white men, wealthy white men. but I started looking into that. But there's just a whole lot of fascinating lore and history of roads in America. One of my passions to research is James Shelby Downard Jr., which I don't know if we talked about that I can't remember if we talked about that the last time, but
I don't remember.
But for anyone who is catching this and unfamiliar with James Shelby Downard Jr., he's the sort of the arch conspiracy theorist in America, and kind of comes out of the 1960s and 1970s. And it's tied into Jim Brandon, William Grimstead. There's a whole lot of weird stuff with Nazis, fascists, and things like that. But Downard, the mythos behind Downard was that he was this researcher who was always wearing a suit, and he had a Colt 45 on his side, and he drove this Airstream trailer across America, visiting all these occult sites. And he was definitely down in the Southwest a lot, along the 33rd degree of latitude. And the story he always told was that he was being persecuted and chased by these Freemasons. And so he also is sort of this motif of the atomic cowboy, right, in post-World War II America. Now, a lot of it is probably invented by William Grimstead and by Michael Hoffman. Again, two very controversial characters. But there's a big connection between the real life Downard, because there really was a James Shelby Downard Jr., but then there's this sort of mythological literary figure that's been created by these other parties for various purposes. But the original guy, his father paved most of the roads in the Midwest. And so there's this heavy element of mysticism and occultism and alchemy that ties into the creation of asphalt in America and the laying of roads. And in many ways, the laying of roads along ley lines and the creation of sort of a mystical network of roads. And so anyway, that was really what I was really trying to research and trying to suss out. And I thought that it was a fantastic motif for the second season to sort of wrap the narrative around, because here in Pulaski County, here in Somerset, Hal Rogers, Senator Hal Rogers, who's actually the oldest, I think he's the oldest GOP senator alive today. He's the senior GOP member because he's the oldest, and he is on the House Appropriations Committee. So he's able to get all kinds of money for whatever project he wants. So he built a road here in Pulaski County. He got, I think it was $20 million for it. And he built 800 feet of the road. And he convinced everyone that this Interstate 66, I-66, was actually part of Route 66, the mother road, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, it's so crazy that this guy was able to get $20 million by making people believe that this was connected to the golden age of America. And so that was a big jumping off point to tie that malfeasance, that local malfeasance, in with the history of Route 66 and why Route 66 is such a mystical road and how it's tied into the the national consciousness. And so that was really I wanted to talk about roads as paths, the journeys, paths to initiation, and just this general idea of roads as a means of change, because it felt like after the first season, everything that we were researching and the deeper that we sort of got into the pennyroyal of mystery and the more that we found, it felt like a journey of sorts. It felt like that we were on a road of some sort. And so I really wanted to tie that into this theme of roads, but also real roads and the occult history of roads.
Yeah. And just the idea that there's an occult history of roads is weird to me.
Yeah, me too.
It's like they're just roads. What could be occult history? What kind of occult history could there be?
But when you the guests on the second season of Pennyroyal talk about this, and I really enjoyed everyone I talked to for the second season. I asked them questions about roads and their ideas about roads and paths to initiation, and also just the lore of the road, because there's all kinds of older concepts. Josh Cutchins talks about, and a lot of the guests actually mention corpse roads, right? And then ferry paths, and so crossroads and all of these things. But Kiki Dombrowski, who's fantastic, she brought up this idea that that when you're on the road, you're driving, and sometimes you kind of zone out, and then you see a UFO on this back road, or you take a road that you've never taken before. You don't know why, and that's when you encounter the other, right?
Yes, and that's happened to me before.
See, and so I think there's something to this idea of what is a road, and how is a road, how does it correlate with mystical experiences? Yeah,
there's this podcast called "Where Did the Road Go?" But
what?
But to me, that's sort of like, okay, let's find the new paths.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think
we've been studying this stuff for a century. Now we need to find the new paths we haven't been down before.
Yeah.
But again, it's still a concept of roads.
Yeah, it's still paths and roads. I think, what is it, American Gods, Neil Gaiman's series, deals with the back roads of America sort of as these sort of mystical pathways. But in a bigger, I guess, way that this idea communicates itself through the pennyroyal story is this idea of, again, I talk about it all the time, probably sound like a broken record, but the idea of second order cybernetics, right?
Yeah.
And that roads in many ways, are paths of information. As roads grew across America, it allowed for the flow of information. And the more that information is flowing, the more complex the systems become, and the more that there are feedback loops and all of these things. And so you can really see the spread of roads across America as sort of this neural network that's forming. And there's a lot of, just in the same way in the human brain, and arguably in AI, that it's the spaces in between the roads where a lot of the magic happens, because those are the unmapped areas. And I think that's also a great way to look at what a road is, what a path is, and what it means to go off. Like you said, where did the road go?
Yeah.
And it's like, when you get off the road, when you go off of the path, what is it that you're going to encounter?
Yeah, very true. And when you're talking second order cybernetics, you're talking about stuff that is altered because of a feedback loop. So it puts stuff out there, and then when it comes back, it changes based on its perception of what it put out there the first time and how it responds.
Yeah. And think about that. I mean, that's what synchronicity is, in a way,
I had suggested that synchronicity is the universe's ad algorithm.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. I love that analogy. I think that's fantastic. Synchronicities, it is a strange thing. I think it's definitely part of, the phenomena, when you look at John Keel's writings and all of his research, and so many other people too, but definitely it's just like the fabric of weirdness that is whatever this is. It seems like synchronicities are almost a building block, or like the atom in a sense.
Yeah. And it's. I think there's different styles of synchronicity too. When Jung first coined the term, that synchronicity that happened in his office was something that completely moved that person, that shifted their consciousness. Whereas a lot of synchronicities are sort of these little ones where you notice them, but they're not causing any massive shift of your consciousness.
Yeah.
And so,
that's.
No, go ahead.
No, so that's totally true, and